Almost 5 years ago, I told you how Berlin and other countries across Europe and the West were cracking down on landlords using their properties how they saw fit. In that particular case, it was cracking down on Airbnbs, a tool that a lot of landlords were using in a decreasing yield environment to actually make some money from their properties, and the government put an end to it. Today, I'm going to share with you a much more nefarious way where Berlin in particular, and possibly other Western countries to follow, are coming after landlords in a big way. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the author of the book Nomad Capitalist and the founder of the company Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you are treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. We've got an article shared with us on Twitter. You can tweet us your video ideas at Nomad Capitalist. This is from Zero Hedge, written by, of course, Tyler Durden. Berlin to vote on confiscating rental properties from corporations, says the headline. And I should warn you, this is the article by Tyler Durden, and it is opinionated. I may agree with much of it, but as are some people want to shoot the messenger, I am merely conveying the article from Zero Hedge. This is not my article, and not everything that we read here means that I endorse it, but I do agree with some of the points. So here's the article from Zero Hedge. And it says, in a time when ultra-left progressives, socialists, and liberals across the U.S. are quietly gathering in corners and testing the public mood with suggestions that the next logical step in the U.S. to a socialist utopia is expropriation of assets, Germany is actively moving towards seizing, read confiscating, rental properties from corporate landlords to provide cheap or even free housing to the masses. And it has Lorena Jonas to thank for this sharp turn to the left. So we've been talking about this. Ultra-left progressives, socialists, and liberals in the U.S. and many other countries, by the way, are gathering to test the public mood about taking people's property, expropriation. And it's interesting that, when we talk about investing in Cambodia or Turkey or Nicaragua, all the years we've talked about markets. Now, I'm not saying those are the markets for you, but I do believe emerging markets, places that have not been on your radar, maybe before you watched us, those should be on your radar. Those offer potential. They offer higher yields. They offer greater capital growth. They offer fewer regulations in a world where landlords are no better than terrorists in some places. And the feedback has been, well, Andrew, what if they come and expropriate your property? And the answer has generally been that those countries are going the other way. They perhaps used to be doing that, and they saw the errors of their ways. Those people got kicked out into the uprights, and new policies came in, and a new public consciousness came in. Well, in the West, you have this rapid increase in people who believe you shouldn't own property, and so that's happening in the U.S., but Zero Hedge says there's a movement towards talking about this very seriously in Germany. Jonas, this is the Lorena Jonas, a generously tattooed goth resident of Germany's capital, has spent the last 8 years fighting landlord rent rises in her trendy Berlin district. But as the Financial Times reports, her latest battle will affect not just her neighbors, but hundreds of thousands of tenants across the city and potentially impact landlord-tenant relationships across the globe. Jonas has been involved in a radical campaign urging Berlin's city government to expropriate 240,000 properties from Germany's biggest publicly listed residential landlords, accusing them of squeezing out lower-income, long-term residents through shoddy maintenance and jacked-up rents. And this is a theme that you do see in places like the U.S. One of the big things in the last year or so has been that, they've always been doing this. There's been a big increase in property purchases by big corporations that are renting them out. People have, been frustrated by that. The media is making a big stink out of it. And if you go on Netflix, by the way, there's one of their many series where they attack at people with money. And one of the things was basically how former President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was overseeing this alleged, empire of slumlord empire, basically, where I'm watching and I'm waiting for them to get to the point. I'm waiting for them to tell me why this guy is so terrible, because he rents out properties in lower income neighborhoods, and it's the worst thing in the world to these people. There is a feeling that if you live in the West, simply making money by renting property is terrible. And by the way, I saw a comment not long ago on social media from someone who said, well, if I'm paying the landlord's rent, why don't I get a share of the house? This is the mindset that is now prevalent in the Western world, where you go out and you buy up, you save your money, you're diligent, You go out, you buy a property, maybe you rinse and repeat, you buy another one, another one, another one. Maybe you develop a little empire after a while. Or maybe you're an investor in one of these programs, maybe a REIT or some other kind of company where they buy up properties. Just as Elizabeth Warren says, if you are a wealthy person, you must by default be a tax cheat. The sentiment now is you must be a shoddy landlord and jacking up rents, as if the inflation we've been seeing and the decreasing value of fiat currencies wouldn't be a reason to jack up rents. Maybe you got to blame your government, people. Maybe Jonas should blame her government that they have not provided her with the opportunities to increase her income to the extent that the inflation and other demands have caused the landlord to increase the rent. She's hardly alone, though, the article continues. Having collected more than 350,000 petition signatures, the proposal, which targets corporate landlords with more than 3,000 apartments each, how dare they, will be voted on in a local referendum in September. I've been talking to Germans, and many of them have said, holy cow, we're waiting for what's coming at the end of this year with the voting, with the elections. And if you want me to comment on this, leave a comment below, and we may talk about this. Some of the new tax proposals that Germany and other countries are talking about bringing in. This will be voted on in a referendum in September. If your company owns 3,000 apartments, that could be a handful of apartment buildings, they're going to vote as to whether they should come and take your property. Amazingly, the article continues, polls suggest nearly half of Berliners support expropriation, which would force the companies to sell their properties to the city government at a fair price. Who determines fair? Is this like the fair share of taxes? Is this like the 1% who pay half the tax revenue and it's not fair share? Who's determining fair? I'd like to know. Perhaps not too surprising, since Berlin was long the capital of the communist version of Germany. It's still a striking observation that nearly half the population in one of Europe's most influential cities is planning to do away with private property. Maybe not entirely at first, but once you start expropriating apartments under the pretext of the greater good, you will never stop. This is why I always talk to you about one key thing, and that is momentum. I've been in business since I was 19 years old, and what I've always felt, now I know the word for it. There was a time when I just felt it. I just had a certain intuition. I couldn't define it. But it's momentum. And when I talk to our team, I say, what's our momentum? Are we increasing the amount of research we're doing? Are we getting better? Are we moving in the right direction? Because you can be moving in the right direction, or you can be moving in the wrong direction. And so some of the countries we talk about, they are not perfect, but they are moving. If you look at, for example, the economic freedom indexes, they are moving in the right direction. They are going up. Their scores are higher every year. They're leapfrogging over. You see countries like Georgia, for example, more free economy than the United States right now. Is it perfect? No, but it's more free than where you live. And the U.S. is going down. Other countries are going down. They are losing. And so momentum, you're either going up or you're going down. I want to follow momentum. And they make a great point in Zero Hedge. If the greater good is your example, you have a voting base that is emotional. They are, let's face it, we're all looking out for number one to some extent. That's what we do. Nobody's trying to throw themselves off a cliff. Nobody's trying to say, hey, I don't need to just take all my stuff. No one wants to do that. I don't care if you have, a salary. I don't care if you have a business. No one wants to give all their stuff away. What people increasingly in the West want to do is they want to give your stuff away. And they use an emotional argument like the greater good to start taking apartments. Now, of course, they'll give you a fair price. You can ask anybody who's had their property taken by the government, what is the fair price? How does that determine? I have a friend who, up until very recently, I think he finally settled something which took up 2 years of his life negotiating with the government that not only wanted to take his property, but they actually had damaged his property in some way while they were negotiating with him, and while they were doing all their work, they actually damaged the property. He believes he could have gotten more money in the fair market, but the government wanted the property, and so there it goes, all for the greater good, of course. What does it mean that my flat is now a commodity in the stock market? This is one of the whiners from Berlin, where the goal is to draw as much profit as possible for shareholders. Oh, God forbid, said Jonas, who lives in a property in Kreuzberg, operated by Berlin's biggest listed landlord, Deutsche Wohnen, the main target of the campaign. These questions are now resounding across Berlin and beyond, yes. And what's resounding across Berlin and beyond is that, as the Zero Hedge says, apartments exist. And the developers and investors are spending billions of dollars, billions of euros, what have you, to build and buy and maintain these things. because they know they can get a return on their money, because they know, I was surprised, by the way, Germany, more than half of the population rents. This, by the way, if you want to talk about how your country is that wealthy and how over half the population rents, you've done something wrong. Either people don't want to own a home, or it's simply impossible to do so. And so how is your country so wealthy if that's the case? The answer to me, by the way, is how about you make it more attractive for business? I wouldn't mind coming and hiring some Germans, quite frankly. As our business expands, would love to come to Germany. But the regulations, the taxes, all the different rules, the requirements make it difficult. We're looking at about 6 different places right now to open up shop. We're doing a big project. And listen, I've known Germans, would like to hire some. It's not anywhere close to making the list. It is too difficult for me, as someone expanding a business who has the world as a buffet to come and choose from. And Ms. Jonas exemplifies that. And she exemplifies the fact that it will only get worse. Why would I want to go and put my money in a business? Why would I want to go and put my money in a property in a place like Germany, where this is the conversation that they're having? I can tell you, you want to go to Cambodia and see if they're having this conversation? I don't think so. Maybe they're trying to stop some much more aggressively, unfortunate deals from happening where there's, true problems going on. The fact that you rent an apartment and you don't like paying rent and you can't find out how to keep your salary. By the way, at a time when more people are becoming millionaires than ever before, when people are creating businesses in their loft apartment during the pandemic, when people are creating wealth, you can't figure out how to keep up. And so as a punishment, you want them to come after companies whose goal is to make money for shareholders, who, by the way, are everyday individuals who just want to keep up with their wealth in this era of inflation and policy craziness. This is what you have going for you. So what people tell me is, at least, Andrew, in the West, we have the rule of law. Who knows what will happen in these other countries? And what I point to is what Steve Wynn, just as one example, said, the casino mogul Steve Wynn. Back when he was running his company, he said you could always count on China to be more consistent than the U.S. At least you knew what to expect from China, which is valuable in business, consistency. The consistency that we think we're getting from the West is the rule of law, property rights, and all that. But we've talked about this happening in Spain. We've talked about it in other countries. We've talked about it with property now in Germany. We've talked about how they impose more and more and more restrictions and regulations and rent controls and restrictions on how you can use your property and who you can rent to and how you can do it and how they have to pay and getting rid of them. There is not a free market for investors in these countries, and now there aren't even property rights. Why are you going to go and pay high taxes, deal with lots of regulations, lots of restrictions, to go and invest in a country, whether it's yours or you're just looking for somewhere else to invest? Why would I, as a global investor, go to Germany and have to deal with not only all that, but people who want to come and take my property? Because Zero Hedge is right. It is not going to stop at 3,000 units. That will be the beginning. The same way you've seen the federal income tax in the United States started at 3%. Look at it now. It is the camel's toe under the tent. It is the beginning of something. Who knows where it ends up? And the sentiment is the problem. The momentum is going the wrong direction. It is the latest example of how Western governments want to take your property. You can say whatever you want about investing in other countries. I have zero fear from looking at articles like this about my property in other places being taken. If I'm investing in Berlin, I have fear, and that's not good as an investor. So people ask, Andrew, how do I get the most out of Nomad Capitalist? How do I begin my Nomad Capitalist journey? The first thing people do is they start right where you're at. They watch YouTube, they listen to podcasts, they read articles at nomadcapitalist.com. We've spent years creating thousands of pieces of free content so that you can get the vibe from someone who's actually done this, from someone who's actually been in your shoes. What they'll do next, they'll get a copy of the book. You can find it on Amazon. It costs a few bucks, and while it's not going to give you all the secrets, it's going to, again, give you more of the vibe. You're going to learn a lot of the things that I've learned. You're going to learn some strategies you can employ, and you're going to get a lot further in your journey. From there, if you are the 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur investor, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com. You can click Become a Client. We're pretty busy these days, but we have availability to help a limited number of people who want to create a holistic plan, something that I think is so important. So if you want to do that, go to nomadcapitalist.com, click Become a Client, learn more about how it works and how we can help you.